Hello, friends. Hello, neighbors, family, comrades, all you citizens of the world. Wherever you're coming from, wherever you're going, and wherever you're at, we welcome you to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. I'm your host, Michael James, here in Chicago, up in the 49th Ward, and it's Thanksgiving Day. We're recording this for the week of November 25th. You know, it's a pretty challenging world out there, and there's a lot of things that can bring us down and kind of challenge our willingness to go on and work for change. But now is the time to nourish ourselves and to really dig in for the long haul because there's a lot of work to do and we can make a real difference in making the world a better place. I want to thank people today, particularly all those who showed up for my new book reading and signing at the Burger Park event put on by the Roman Susan Gallery. It was a good turnout. People apparently liked what I had to say. There was a good question and answer period, and it was a good time. If you want to get the book, contact me. You'll figure out a way to do that. Today, we're going to do something a little different on Live from the Heartland. You know, there's a few challenges going on. One is that WLUW has been putting up a new tower. So sometimes you don't get it that way. I just want to let everyone know that the easiest way to get the show always is youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos. You can listen or you can watch. But today we're going to honor our old friend who just recently passed away, the wonderful Marilyn Katz. And regular listeners to the show and political activists and people here in Chicago know a lot about Marilyn. And we probably have 10 interviews with Marilyn over the years, and we're going to use them selectively. And we'll probably put together a collection of clips from some. But today we're going to run our last two interviews with Marilyn full tilt, along with some music. And hopefully you get a little nourishment from this, a little inspiration. And in Marilyn's name and in her honor, we all continue to do good in the world. So enjoy the show, and we'll be back next week with some new interviews and probably some new guests. Thank you very much. Live it up today. Nourish yourself, and we're going forward because we got a lot of work to do. Well, welcome back to more Live from the Heartland for the week of July 29th. And it always brings me great pleasure to bring on an old friend, someone I've worked with and really greatly admire, the one and only Marilyn Katz of MK Communications. She's an organizer. She's a political strategist. She is something else. And we've been dancing around trying to get her on to talk about Israel. And the stuff in Israel just keeps unfolding. I'd like to share at the start that I grew up in a town that was pretty progressive. It was an upper middle class town in Connecticut, Westport. And there were a lot of very progressive Jewish people in my town. I grew up, liking Israel. I read Exodus. But over the years, as a political hombre, my support for Israel has really dissipated greatly. And I'm really sad about some of the situations that people over there, particularly the Palestinians, are dealing with. As we bring Marilyn on, I would like to just read from the Israeli Declaration of Independence. Quote, the state of Israel will be open for Jewish immigration and for the ingathering of the exiles. It will foster the development of the country for the benefit of all its inhabitants. It will be based on freedom, justice, and peace as envisioned by the prophets of Israel. It will ensure complete equality of social and political rights to all its inhabitants, irrespective of religion, race, or sex. It will guarantee freedom of religion, conscience, language, education, and culture. It will safeguard the holy places of all religions, and it will be faithful to the principles of the Charter of the United Nations. Marilyn, you sent that to me, and you had a HMMMM after it. Take it away. What do we make of all this?
Well, so when I was a small child, I went to a Jewish school, and I was taught by Sabras, those people who had been raised in Israel, and they were all progressive socialists. So I grew up by the time of 3 to 8, viewing Israel as a positive, in fact, in the sanctuary of the temple on the ceiling still today is written, all created equal. So that formed a sense of Jewish values that I thought went back hundreds of years to fight for socialism. And there was a real division, I mean, I've learned later, between the progressive socialists who founded the country and worked the kibbutzim and folks who were more right-wing, like in the Irgun, who were terrorists, essentially, who terrorized the Palestinians. And then by 1967, Michael, right after I met you, it was clear the game was over, that Israel had become a bellicose state. My Jewish relatives would say things like, the only good Palestinian is a dead Palestinian. And so even by then, it was clear that Israel had transformed itself from a haven into a colonizer state. And the folks that they colonized were the Palestinians. So I personally stayed away from Israel and the issue for decades. And the first time I went to Israel was in 2000, when it looked like there might be an accommodation between an independent Palestinian state and an independent Israel, mutually respectful. But even then, it was clear that Arabs and also Black Jews from Ethiopia were very unequal in Israel proper. However, that's when the prime minister stepped on the Temple Mount on a Friday and created an uprising, which became the Second Intifada, which was the pretext that Israel used to take what is now 68% of the land in the West Bank and control all of it, which is startling. So if you went back today, which I've gone pretty much every year until 2019, to the pandemic, you would see the Israelis having used the pretext of the Second Intifada to totally wall off the individual villages within the West Bank. It almost looks like a muffin tin. So in order to say, for example, to take a trip that would normally take 5 minutes between Lincoln Park and Lakeview, it would take an hour and a half by the time you went away, all the way around the walls. So in the last 20 years, what has happened and what has allowed what happened, well, let's talk about what happened last week and then go back.
Yeah, let me just share that, what really hit home for me was when my mom went to Israel with a church group. And when she came back, and she really loves everybody, she says, Mike, they don't treat those Palestinians very well. And it's clear that we have a lot of Palestinians in refugee camp in Jenin, which was recently attacked. We have big demonstrations in the streets over people not wanting them to limit the powers of the Israeli Supreme Court. It's just ongoing. So give us a little bit more.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a lot more, but so why now? Why this? So last week, and these things go together, it is true that the Netanyahu government has proposed limiting the ability of the Supreme Court to act on laws that it passes, and makes it the Supreme Court to be appointed by the party in power for that moment. So it would be like, Trump would get to appoint the entire Supreme Court. So there are two things about it. While a lot of the Israeli protest has focused on, religious rights and gay rights and trans, the real objective here is to allow, in my opinion, to allow Israel to totally annex the West Bank and make sure that any law that, right now, if you're a Palestinian, you can't get a building permit. If you're a Palestinian, there are 120 different rules to get a pass into Israel. If you're a Palestinian, you cannot go from your town to the sea if you live in the West Bank. and you have no right to challenge the taking of your lands. So at the moment, as bad as that is, it would be worse because you would have no independent Supreme Court even to appeal to. So many of us who've been really dealing with this issue, while we are very sympathetic to the civil liberties of our sisters and brothers who are Israeli Jews, are really looking at the issue of occupation, and that this move on the Supreme Court is part of fulfilling what a section of the Jewish community has wanted from the beginning. It's not just Netanyahu, which is the total removal of Palestinians from the West Bank, and not by, in 1948, between 750,000 and 1 million fled. Right now, the tactic has been to make living on the West Bank impossible. No water systems, disconnected from the grid, no building permits, no ability to move freely, not only between the West Bank and Israel, but between one village and another, the inability to go to school, the inability to easily get an education. The message is clear. It's better if you leave.
Marilyn, let me jump in and ask you, what's the situation for Palestinians who live in Israel? And I understand there's about 1/3 of the Israeli population is non-Jewish, to be Palestinian mostly. What's that situation?
It's a second and third class citizenry. Last year, they made Hebrew the official language of Israel and took down many of the dual signages. When getting permits to build housing has the same kind of challenges that the West Bank has. Thirdly, you don't have rights. If I'm a Palestinian, if I'm an Arab Israeli, and I go to marry someone from Jordan or the West Bank, I can no longer live within Israel. The schools are less funded. The Arab towns are in shambles. The streets, it is worse than Black towns in the United States in terms of resources, in terms of equitable funding, in terms of rights.
I'm wondering what people can actually do. I know that there's an issue that brings it back to Illinois, which we'll talk about in a minute. But I got some news today. You might have been one of the things you sent me, but it said Biden is weighing a big Middle East deal. And, he's talking about trying to do some kind of a peace deal with Saudi Arabia to open up recognition of Israel by a number of Muslim-dominant countries, as long as the Palestinians were treated fairly in this arrangement. What do you know about this big Middle East deal that Biden is looking at?
I read it on the same. That's why I sent it to you from Tom Friedman. I had not known about it. I think that is a potential, but let's be real. We are a year away from elections, and the Jewish vote has been 75% of all Jews vote Democratic. You should know that. And they don't really vote on Israel. They really vote on all the progressive things for which Jews tend to fight, women's rights, abortion rights, blah, 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 civil rights. That said, I don't know. I mean, it's clear that Biden has not been able to, even though he's been pushed by the progressive Jewish organizations, and there are many, J Street, APN, the Progressive Jewish Network, he has not been bold. In fact, it's really interesting to me that the person who has been boldest is Nicholas Kristof. Nicholas Kristof proposed this week that funding for Israel be predicated on the promise by Israel not to expand the settlement. Bernie Sanders today came out with the saying, I don't think it goes far enough. I mean, I think the Jewish community should take the lead in asking for retrenchment. I mean, here's how I think about it, Mike. you and I became very politically active over civil rights and the war in Vietnam. And I consider the Palestinians today as Vietnamese. If, in fact, it had not been for the Holocaust, all of us would have been fighting for anti-colonial liberation of the Palestinian people. And, and that's what I think we have to do today. So I think we do need to pressure the feds to deny aid unless there's a retrenchment and a commitment not to. I mean, it may not work, but it's got to be the demand. And secondly, on a local level, we should use an anti-BDS fight to educate people, as we did in South Africa, on the apartheid within Israel property and the colonization in the West Bank and Gaza. I'm game. Nothing like a good fight. And this is a good one.
Let me ask you, I know that there is an Illinois law that I want to address as we go out, but we have a few minutes left. And I'm wondering, I live up here in the 49th Ward, and it used to be, Irish Catholic and Jewish predominantly, and both of them, not so much anymore, but a little west of here, I see all kind of Orthodox Jews on the street. And I'm wondering, and I see signs that, synagogues support Israel. I'm wondering what is in the States, and particularly here in Chicago, is there a split in the Jewish community, liberal and then conservative? Where's that all at?
So if you took the city and the suburbs, you would say that in terms of membership, AIPAC, which is the American Israeli Political Action Committee, and it's a right wing, is bigger in terms of membership, paid membership. But I would say that in terms of voting and in terms of action, actually the majority of the Jewish community is unaligned and critical of Israel. Now, the West Side crowd, forget it. I mean, they're a thing to themselves. They're very religious, they're very kosher, they're very Orthodox, and they keep to themselves. And it would be unlikely that they would ever kind of critique Israel at all.
There's a law in Illinois passed by the General Assembly here, and we're really a blue state, a progressive state compared to most others. In 2015, the Illinois General Assembly passed a law making it illegal for the state to do business with any company that refuses to do business in the occupied West Bank. And that would include Ben and Jerry's, who were a target of the lawmakers, because they basically sell ice cream in Israel, but wouldn't sell it in the occupied West Bank. There's an Illinois anti-boycott law that hinders protests of Palestinians' oppression. And, we want to protest. We want to demand justice. What do you had a piece in the Tribune, I believe, an op-ed piece recently.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about what we can do to try to change this law. I'm going to right away talk to my state rep and my state senator.
It's a really interesting question. So I tried this 2 years ago when I first learned it, when Ben and Jerry's came up. And frankly, Mike, everybody, including all the so-called progressives, were afraid of the issue. So my feeling is, and I'd love to hear from people, that Jews and other progressives have to take the lead, make it comfortable for our less than intrepid elected officials to stand up. And I'm talking about the ones who consider themselves the most progressive. This is not, it cannot be left to Abdel Nasser Rashid to fight this fight. This is a Jewish fight. We created the situation. We need to solve it. So I am looking, hopefully we'll get the cooperation of both J Street and Americans for Peace Now and a bunch of progressive rabbis to begin to wage a campaign this fall that goes at the removal of this law. And so I'm very eager to hear from you.
Well, let's keep pushing this issue. You and I need to be talking to each other more. And I'm going to have you back on the show with more news about Israel or anything you care to discuss, Marilyn.
And
Uh,
there's always stuff I want to discuss.
yeah, I'm sure you're full of ideas. And if we weren't running out of time here on this week's Live from the Heartland, we'd talk more. But we're going to leave it at that. But give you
I'll be back.
go give 1 minute about what you want people to be doing.
So I want everybody to um, read what's happened in the last weeks in Israel, and then I want everyone to contact both their state rep and senator, but also their alderperson. Because what I was able to stop 2 years ago was a similar resolution in the Chicago Human Rights Council. So make the difference. We can make the difference. So either write me at mkatz@mkcpr.com, call Michael, but most important, let me know what you need for information so you can call your state rep, your state senator, and don't let them get away with it. We cannot privilege Jewish voters in the state over Palestinian or Jordanian or any other ones. So thank you.
You know, last week we did have Michael Deutsch on, and one of the things he's talking about is a Palestinian who was having issues with citizenship, et cetera. And that would be like all of the Heartland stuff. It's at youtube.com/heartlandmedia/videos. We're back. We're back with more Live from the Heartland. I'm Michael James, and it always brings me a lot of pleasure to bring on our next guest, the one, the only Marilyn Katz. About a week ago, I got something in the mail alerting me to an op-ed piece that Marilyn did, I think, for the Sun-Times. And it was Teach the Real Legacy of Fred Hampton and the Black Panthers to Inspire Our Youth. And since it was the week of the Black Panthers in my life, having Billy Brooks, a.k.a. Che, on the show, as well as having him talk to my class, I figured we're going to stay in the fold here, and we're going to talk about the Panthers and Fred Hampton, and we may get to a few other things. So good afternoon to you, Marilyn. It's always good to see you. And tell us a little bit about what led you to write this op-ed for the Sun-Times.
Mike, it's always great to be here with you. The week after Mayor Johnson declared it Fred Hampton Day, I was reading the paper and noticed that it was the first weekend in 20 years where somebody had not been killed. A young Black man had not been killed. And I was thinking about those 20 years and what had happened, and thinking about Fred, and thinking about how could 13,000 young Black men have lost their lives at the hands of one another over the last 20 years. And thinking that part of it was due to the wrong legacy being carried for the last 60 years. So in our remembrances, we tend to think about glorious deaths. You know, we focus on the death of Martin Luther King, the assassination of Fred, when we really should be focusing on their lives. And if we really want people to value life and to aspire to lead a revolutionary life, then we need to focus on their lives, not their death. And the Sun-Times chose to cut out one line in which I had said that Hanrahan and Daley had very consciously let all the gangbangers live and killed all the revolutionaries. And so the legacy that young men have is you live by the gun. And the legacy they have is they never saw the contrast between Fred and Bobby and Billy, who took up the gun to defend the community, and Jeff Fort and the Gangster Disciples, who took up guns to prey on the community. And that, I think, is an important difference and a legacy that we really need to reinforce and help people understand.
Well, in your piece, when you talk about let's create a curriculum of Fred Hampton's life, what would that look like?
It's really
I,
interesting.
I know that we do have a situation in the victory over in regard to the Burge torture case. There was some agreement that they were going to teach about it in schools, and I don't know if that relates, but it probably does to the larger real presentation of true Black history and true people's history in our schools.
Yes, but it focuses on Blacks as victims. And so most of what we teach is how to be a victim and how you've been victimized. What we're taught and what people talk about, all the legacy, what I hear in the prisons is Blacks as victims. But there is another legacy that goes from the sit-ins in the South to SNCC, to Fred Hampton, to what they were trying to do, which is an empowerment. And even though they killed Fred, that legacy goes all the way from SNCC, the sit-ins, to Barack Obama. It is an empowerment story, not a solution. And the second thing is about really what the Panthers were about. And what they were building was the nucleus of a new society in the belly of the beast. So the programs that they did, breakfast for children, childcare, daycare, free schooling, free legal aid, free medical health, none of those programs existed in the federal government. Right. They were programs created by and introduced by the Panthers as what a good society should look like. And that's what they were killed for.
And they, other groups, including Rising Up Angry, the Young Patriots, the Young Lords, did create those Serve the People programs. But let's be clear, it was the Panthers who initiated them.
And also initiated that coalition between themselves and Rising Up Angry and the Young Patriots and the Young Lords, which really anticipated a unifying strategy for revolution and change.
I always talk about how it helped to lay the groundwork, not only for Harold Washington, but for Obama. And I would even claim that a lot of us older folks and our kids and all that were really very much involved in helping to elect Brandon Johnson.
Oh, absolutely. I always tell the story. And I tell it to all the reporters too, that when we were 18, I met Leon Finney and Willie Barrow and Al Raby. And when I came back in 82 and did Harold's campaign to the media, who did I meet? I'd been in California all this time. We're all of us grown up. It was Cha-Cha, and it was Chewy, and it was you, and it was Slim, and we were just now, instead of 18, we were 32. And so we elect Harold. And then in 2002, when I held the rally against the war in Iraq, what I call the first rally by internet, who was my core group? You, Carl Davidson, Leon Finney, everybody who I'd met in 68, 69.
Yeah, well, you and I do go back pretty far. I've been counting it up, and it's like from 1966 till now would be 57 years.
Wow, can't be true.
And, it's 57 years. You'd think we would have had socialism by now.
Yeah, we did think we would have socialism by now, dear, if you remember. Personally, I was going to be a ballet dancer by now. Not with ballet, not belly.
Well, the Fred Hampton thing that you raise really is probably a larger question. How do we have curriculum in our public schools, particularly here in Chicago, that really addresses all the good that people like Fred did? And I don't know if there's a movement to do that. And I don't know what goes on inside the teachers union and how much they get to shape curriculum. But if you have any thoughts on that and going forward, what we might advocate for to make that a reality, spill the beans now.
Well, I did talk to Billy Brooks, and I did hear from the Howard Zinn people. So I am hoping, and I got a lot of emails like, great idea. So I'm hoping that we can move something forward. But it raises a very big question. Why do people make revolution? Why do they make change? I don't think it's because they're victimized. I think it's a tension between what we think our potential is and it's a pushback against it. So part of it is really thinking, understanding that social change doesn't come from the most hideous condition. It comes from our expectations of something better. And that's a mentality that I think progressives have to grasp.
I think, yeah, that another way to put that would be when people have rising expectations that are not met, that they tend to act out a little bit.
Right. And that's really important and really a difference. We are not simply all victims. We are not, we have the potential for greatness. And that's what you and I and Billy Brooks and everybody else really needs to remember and teach.
Yeah, I think we do. We do have to keep talking to people about how there could be a better way. And yes. Speaking of that, let me shift gears here, because the last time I had you on was over a crisis in the Constitution and the governing of Israel. And I wondered if you had any short little update on what's going on in Israel, because you do pay closer attention to that than I do. And I would love to hear what you might have to say about it.
Well, this is my not so hopeful part. I mean, I think Israel, to me, the only reason to stay involved in Israel is the reason we stayed involved in Vietnam. That Israel is the Palestine is an occupied country, occupied by colonialists. And it's our duty, moral duty as Jews, to oppose a colonial strategy, an imperialist strategy. The Palestinians are an incredible, resourceful people. Will they win this one? There is an increasing awareness of Israel's misdeeds. Even Nicholas Kristof, but I don't know whether the Saudis and all the rest of them will sell them out, the Palestinians in the short run. All I know is that as a Jew, progressive Jew, that's still on my agenda. I'm not giving up. And in fact, I'm buying more Palestinian products all the time because they are not simply victims. They're the best educated people in the entire Middle East, with women engineers. It's a very robust society. So I will give you a status report, but not giving up yet.
Okay, that's good. Now I'm going to switch to politics.
That's something simple, like migrants or something?
I don't know. Do you have a position on what we ought to do with migrants? Like right now in Illinois, for those who don't know, who might be listening or viewing, we have our new mayor was coming up with a plan for a massive tent city that would be enacted by the same people who've done some anti-immigration stuff for Governor DeSantis. And the Governor Pritzker, basically he threw some water on that little fire, saying he wasn't sure that was the best way to go. And he, like other people, have talked about utilizing existing structures that are not being occupied or used to handle migrants. I don't know if you want to address that or just give a little bit on.
I would agree. I think 10 cities are ridiculous. This, even with global warming, it gets cold. But mainly, we're talking about 31 million a month. 31 million a month, and 5,000 migrants arriving here this week. We'll be broke. There's no way it's a federal problem. Abbott has sent all the migrants to cities with large Black populations, stirring up the pot and antagonisms between Blacks and Hispanics. The Mexican community is upset. There are millions of Mexicans here who don't have a work permit. It's a federal problem. it's got to really, I mean, Biden's got to step up.
Yeah, I hope he does. I mean, I really think that the feds have to get involved with this. And I think for us, the organizers on the ground here in Chicago, it is a challenge because you do have some communities who've been disenfranchised in many ways and things taken away or promises not kept are saying, hey, we're here for a long time. We've got these issues. And now we're trying to deal with this onslaught of people looking for a better life. And we want to welcome them. We also have to figure out how to handle that challenge. And for people need to realize that these people who are coming will be voters someday. They'll be citizens and there'll be a big voting block. And I think we really want to handle it in a principled way. So I know that we're going to try to have other people on. Alderman Vasquez has been on before. We've had Maria Haddon. We've talked about this and we will talk about it again. But it's something that's a real challenge, but an opportunity for people here to make conditions better or to deal with the conditions. But we need the support and the help of the federal government.
But if anybody knows of any empty Catholic schools, let somebody know.
Yeah, St. Jerome's over on Loyola is one.
There are a lot.
I'd love to see that turn into something.
There's a mission for you. And you've got the megaphone, hon.
Well, we're working on it. A couple other things I want to ask you about, Marilyn, in the few minutes that we've got. We have a situation where the Speaker of the House was voted out yesterday. And I want to ask you flat out, do you have any take on government in D.C.? And then I'm going to touch on political races, too, that are coming up in the future. Any thoughts on D.C.?
It's out of control. Where it lands, I don't know. I mean, I was a little surprised with the Hakeem Jeffries move to decide to support the far right wing in their ouster. I can, kind of see it, but for fun, but I don't know where it lands. And now they threw Pelosi and Steny Hoyer out of their second offices. I mean, just chaotic.
Little petty stuff, yeah.
I think this is uncharted water.
Well, you know who I was watching on TV? I watch Nicole, whatever her name is, on CNN or MSNBC.
MSNBC.
She's very good, I think.
She's
and
great.
She had on this former Republican congressman from Florida, Peter Jolly, I think is his name, or is it David Jolly? I should have this down. Anyhow, he was, as a former Republican, he basically was encouraging the Democrats not to come to the aid of McCarthy. And so I said at the outset of the show, I was glad that they stood together, and we'll have to see where that falls. Let me ask you, Marilyn Katz, what you see as some important races out there and what people should take note of, and what people on the left, progressives who still believe that we got to work in their electoral realm, what they should be doing in the next period of time.
Well, I mean, one obviously important one is California. I do have a favorite. I think Barbara Lee, who's a Black progressive congresswoman, should get that seat in California.
Yeah.
I think it's going to be, I want to see how the Southern strategy works and whether we can, in Georgia and the Carolinas, actually make some headway. To me, the key issue, well, a few things. I think abortion and reproductive rights continues to be the wedge issue. And that if I had gobs of money, that's where I would really focus my time and money. It's the only way to get into the states that could go one way or the other. And I think, states like, I think Virginia's up, and a couple more border states, and we need those, in Michigan. And I really do think that is the only reliable issue. In fact, I wish there were more outrage than there is.
Yeah, I'm still blown away that Biden hasn't gotten a little more credit for some of the stuff he's done. But I don't know if it's, if it's too long range, and if people, regarding infrastructure, jobs, et cetera, he doesn't get as much. I'm totally surprised he's been as good as he has been, and I'm grateful.
Well,
But
one time
I don't know if it's translated yet.
we should probably do a show on what's happened with the media and the fact of its fragmentation and what people know or don't know. Let me tell you something. I was looking this up. When Brandon brags about having a mandate, he came in with 15% of the potential vote in the city of Chicago, Brandon Johnson. When we came in with Harold, Michael, 77% of the city voted, and we came in with 55% of that. Now, part of that is just really, are people uninterested? It's really the fact that there is no unifying media. We don't know what we don't know. So you talk about Biden getting credit. Who do you think's reading about him? How do people know what,
Sure.
What do you think people are doing? Like, they're not like us. They're not nerding the papers and looking at Build Back Better. They're looking at, give me that tequila, and is Kansas City going to win this game tonight?
All right, Marilyn, thanks a lot. And I will look forward to seeing you soon. Keep
Bye-bye.
up the good work. Adios.
Thank you.
And everybody else, stay tuned. We're going to take a little break, and we'll be right back with more live from the Heartland here on the left end of your dial, WLUW 88.7, also CAN TV on Thursday nights at 9, as well as Spotify and Google Podcasts and youtube.com/Heartland Media. That's it. We'll be right back. Don't go too far. Well, we want to thank you for tuning in for this Thanksgiving Day broadcast, which will air on Saturday morning, the 25th, as well as at youtube.com, as well as Spotify and Google. We hope you enjoyed listening to Marilyn Katz. She was a really good pal. She did great work. She was always very supportive of me. I did help to recruit her when we met her at Northwestern in the spring of 1966. She came to Uptown and worked with Join Community Union, did a lot of other wonderful things, and we do miss her. So we want to also thank all the people who make this show possible: Katie Hogan, Lynn Orman, Tom Clark, and our engineer and my son, Hal James. We do want to encourage you to do good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do. There's a lot to do out there, and I know you can play a real important part. So get at it. After today's Thanksgiving meal and gathering with friends and family, go forward in the world, make it a better place.